Don't worry about it, Estelle, Eric said, gently laying his large hand on her frail shoulder. I've got this. Estelle reached up and put her own small hand onto his. Her eyes closed behind her almost comically thick glasses, and a small tear tracked down her cheek. I should try and help, she started to explain, her voice small and frail compared to Eric's. I can distract them, or I could... Words failed her. She knew that she would be more of a burden than a help. Eric just smiled, down at her. At 6'4" tall, he towered over her as she stood at a mere 5 feet of height. Where he was just 35 years of age, strong and hardy, with muscles built from years of logging, she was elderly, pushing 85 at least, though he knew better than to ask, and she was thin, sickly, and riddled with pain. Her shockingly white hair contrasted with her dark skin. The two could not have been more opposite. Estelle had been picked up in South Georgia. Eric was picked up in Oregon. The only reason they had been taken, as some bug-faced-looking troll explained to them, his chirping and clicking sounds changed by a device on his belt into English, was because that some great event which he called the Galactic Games had arrived. It seems that once every 25 galactic cycles, a contest of great import took place, where 50 species all fought to the death in the great arena. The betting and money that changed hands during this event had fortunes won and lost. Planets changed possession, and in some unfortunate cases, entire races subjugated to indentured servitude, all due to an ill-informed wager. This year, there was only 49 species, as one that normally attended the games were wiped out by their sun going nova. They needed another species, and so they searched and found the humans. Rather than asking for a tribute of 2 members, the game committee felt it prudent to just take 2 at random. So that is what they did. The bug troll went on to explain that 2 members from each species volunteered after spending their lives training for this event. The winner would receive 25x the weight of their heaviest opponent in whatever precious metal they desired, and the prestige. You can choose any luxury, bed any other's partner, demand any exorbitant price to make an appearance, and it will be granted. The bug troll hesitated, seemingly sure that the newcomers called humans would be impressed. He was only slightly disappointed to see they were not. I did not volunteer for anything, Eric growled through clenched teeth. He looked back at his companion, the elderly black woman called Estelle. And I am pretty sure she did not either. The bug troll remained quiet for a moment, as if trying to think of a proper response. What he finally said was, I don't care. As he turned to leave, he said, whether you fight or not makes no difference. Once in that arena, whoever you are facing will kill you. I hope to make a large sum from your deaths if you are the first race to perish. And so that is how Eric and Estelle, the first humans ever in the Galactic Games, came to be. Eric shuddered at some of the other species he saw. Small, fast beings with razor-sharp claws, hulking beasts whose hands were the size of his head, thin creatures that seemed to flicker in and out of his vision, and worst of all, something that Eric could only describe as a mantis spider. Long, scything talons, mandibles that dripped some greenish-colored liquid, and a huge, towering arachnid body. It gave him the shivers to even think about it. That is Tiamat, one of the guards told him as the creature lumbered by. He is by far the favorite to win the event. Eric looked helplessly at the hulking beast. And there are 2 of them? He asked. The guard barked out a laugh. Yes, but Tiamat will kill his partner the moment the games begin. Most of the champions do it. It's tradition. No need to share the spoils. The guard turned an eye stalk to where Estelle was in the back of their holding area, on her knees, rocking back and forth and praying for salvation. I think it would be easy for you to do the same, he said. Eric recoiled, in disgust. The calm nonchalance in which the alien suggested he kill a helpless woman just solidified what he was dealing with. And it made the thought of killing them a little easier to bear. So when it was about to begin, Eric placed his hand on Estelle's shoulder. Don't worry about this, Estelle, he said gently. I got this. When it begins, I will pretend to kill you, and you just lie down. I think that will be enough to keep you safe, at least for a little while. Estelle could only nod her head in silence, her hand resting on Eric's, with tears of frustration squeezing out from tightly clenched eyes. The arena they stood in was packed, floor to ceiling with spectators. Announcers spoke the names of the competitors and their odds of winning, translated into every language. The crowd was already cheering without the games having even begun. In the arena itself, 100 warriors stood facing each other, spread out evenly. A countdown began, blaring over the loudspeakers, but the roar from the crowd almost drowned it out. Then a loud, wailing siren sounded. The games had begun. Immediately, Eric turned to Estelle and put his hands around her throat. He looked like he was choking the life out of her, but he was really just gently lowering her to the ground. "Don't move," he whispered to her. "Don't let them know you are alive." Estelle gave a subdued sob, a slight nod of her head, and lay still. Eric stood and looked around. It seemed that most of his competitors also had just attacked their partners. The second the games began, the ground of the arena was already littered with the dead. Eric saw Tiamat slicing up his partner easily, body parts and blood flying with every swipe of Tiamat's mighty claws. Shaking his head in disgust, Eric advanced toward his nearest enemy, a bipedal feline-looking creature. The fight was quick. The cat creature darted in, hissing at Eric, but a quick right cross brought the thing to the ground, and then a quick stomp from a work boot ended it. The crowd was always roaring at some action that was going on, mostly around Tiamat's victories. Eric made sure to steer clear of any area Tiamat was in. As the number of fighters dwindled, Eric realized that most of his competitors were very badly winded, some struggling to stay upright as the battle raged. Eric was tired, yes, but he had plenty more reserves to draw from. It was this that kept him alive. He kept moving, darting in and hitting opponents, then darting out until the opponent dropped, or they got frustrated enough to move on to a newer, slower opponent. Eric saw himself, facing off against an alien that looked like a small tree, with dark bark for skin and long twig-like fingers. Eric soon found out that even though the twigs looked fragile, they were razor-sharp and deadly. Eric struggled against this tree creature, but was unable to get in close. Every time he tried, a quick slash ended his attempt and opened more wounds. On Eric, his arms, chest, and back were soon covered in bleeding gashes. Looking around, Eric saw that there were only 3 fighters left. The tree creature, himself, and Tiamat, who was standing back, watching them fight to the death. No need. To attack now, let them fight and hurt each other more. Eric became desperate. He was unable to penetrate the defenses of the tree creature, and he was losing a lot of blood. He had no choice. He feigned weariness, stumbling and making slow lunges. He was attempting to lure the creature into thinking he was worse off than he really was. It seemed to work. The creature became more excited, taking more risks to end the fight, as Tiamat slowly circled them both, waiting to rush in and attack the victor. Eric stumbled and fell to a knee. The creature rushed in to finish him, but instead of finding an exhausted human on his last legs, the tree creature suddenly saw Eric lunge forward, his left arm grabbing it by the throat. The creature thrashed, slashing at the arm that had it, in an iron grip. Tiamat started to approach, getting ready to pounce. Looking directly into Tiamat's eyes, Eric roared, his deep, bellowing voice even drowning out the roar of the crowd, and Eric lifted the tree creature by his throat off the ground, one-handed, while the creature continued to slash his arm to bloody ribbons. Tiamat hesitated and saw, with a final roar, Eric shake the creature by the neck. Tiamat heard a loud snap as the neck broke, and Tiamat watched as Eric threw the corpse to the dirt, his eyes never leaving Tiamat's. For the first time in his long life, Tiamat found himself a little intimidated. Eric stood facing Tiamat, his left arm ripped to shreds by the tree creature. His red blood ran down his arm, to his fingers and down into the gray dirt of the arena. Tiamat extended his front foreclaws, long, scything, and razor-sharp. Tiamat was limping a little, as an opponent had managed to damage his back left leg. Eric looked hopelessly around. There was nothing he could use as a weapon, nothing but his own hands. Tiamat rushed at Eric, swinging with his mighty claws, but Eric was able to dive out of the way. Tiamat struggled to turn and face him. His back leg was hurt more than Eric first thought. It gave him a little hope. If he could stay out of the way of the talons, he may be able to wear Tiamat out. So Eric started a long cat and mouse game, the audience roaring each time a claw almost cut him in half. There were many times a piece of paper could not have fit between the talons of Tiamat and Eric's skin. Soon, Tiamat started to tire. His slashes slowed down, and instead of wide, sweeping swipes at Eric to save energy, Tiamat started to slash straight downwards, the tip of his claw digging into the dirt of the arena floor. Eric saw his chance. The next time Tiamat sliced downwards, the tip of his claw embedding itself deep in the hard-packed dirt of the arena, Eric threw his entire body weight in a lunge at the claw, hitting it with his shoulder. A loud crack echoed through the arena, and Tiamat roared in pain, flailing backwards, his right arm spurting green blood where the claw had broken off at the wrist. Eric quickly grabbed Tiamat's broken claw and, straining, managed to pull it out of the dirt. The crowd was on their feet, stamping and screaming as Eric stood, facing Tiamat, using Tiamat's own claw as a weapon against him. Tiamat hissed in rage and pain and lunged at Eric. Eric roared at Tiamat and ran to meet him, the two gladiators, slamming into each other, slashing and tearing, trying to end each other's existence and finish this. Eric screamed in pain when Tiamat managed to slice through his abdomen and down into his thigh. Eric knew that Tiamat had overextended himself to do this, so Eric swung with all his strength at Tiamat's chest, where the claw Eric was using as a weapon ripped through the protective plating and stuck in Tiamat's spine. Tiamat roared in pain, grabbed the claw stuck in his chest, yanked it out, and immediately fell to the dirt, twitching and spasming as the claw severed his spine when Tiamat had ripped it out. Eric fell to his knees, then to his back. His lifeblood pooled around him, and his vision began to fade. He knew he was dying, but he also knew that Tiamat would follow quickly behind. The thought of that made Eric smile, and that is how this noble human passed, victorious in battle, against a larger, stronger foe, with a ghost of a smile on his lips. As Eric expired, Tiamat knew he was the winner. He tried to struggle to move, but he was helpless. He knew, however, that he would be allowed medical attention now that the tournament was over, but it would have to come quick if he was to survive this. That human was a lot stronger and tougher than he ever dreamed. Tiamat's eyes darted in all directions, straining to see the medical personnel that should be running to his aid. He saw nothing. The crowd was silent, questioning why the winner had not been announced. Eric the human was dead. Tiamat was still alive, if barely, so Tiamat was the victor. Where was the blaring siren denoting the end of the games and Tiamat victorious? A gasp ran through the crowd as all eyes turned to where Estelle lay in the dirt. They saw her slowly sit up and struggle to her feet. They watched as she looked around the blood-stained arena, festooned with body parts and corpses. They watched as she slowly shuffled forward in her fluffy slippers, each step creating a small cloud of dust. They watched in silence as she knelt by Eric, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Rest well, my warrior," she said softly, and closed his unseeing eyes with her trembling hand. She struggled back to her feet and looked with pure hatred at Tiamat. Tiamat tried to move, to slash out at the frail human approaching him, but Eric's strike had been too deep. His limbs would not respond. Tiamat tried to say something, but only managed to cough up a green blob of bloody mucus to the dirt he lay in. He watched in terror as Estelle stooped and picked up his broken claw. Tiamat tried to flail around, to scream, to do anything, but his body would not respond. He just saw Estelle slowly walk up to him and place the sharp point of his own broken claw to his eye, for Xiao. "Eric," Estelle managed to say, and put all her sickly, frail weight on the claw. It was enough. The razor-sharp talon slid through Tiamat's eye, releasing a greenish, stringy liquid, and pierced through into his brain. The crowd was as silent as the grave. Suddenly, a loud siren blared, causing the entire arena to jump in their seats. "Amazing!" An announcer's voice blared through the stadium. "Amazing! The games are over! We have a winner!" And then the crowd erupted in a roar of pure emotion. Some wailed at lost fortunes, others screamed for the unlikely human, and others yelled just to release pent-up emotions. "The victor of the games," the announcer roared, and beams of light from a dozen different sources shone down on Estelle's bent and shaking form. Estelle the mighty, decimator of fortunes, destroyer of Tiamat, humanity's strongest warrior. Estelle only shuffled slowly back to the large gate at the exit to the arena. The crowd roared with excitement with every step she took, each puff of blood-stained dirt her slippers raised. And then, just before she disappeared from view, she turned back to the crowd. A silence so complete you could hear the faintest of noises fell across the crowd. Every ear was bent. All attention was focused on this human warrior who stunned the galaxy, waiting to see what she would do or say. Estelle slowly looked across the vast arena, taking in all the alien forms and creatures that covered every square inch of her vision. She slowly raised both arms above her head, her small hands clenched into fists. And then she quickly extended the middle finger of each hand, turned on her heel, and left. Roaring, thinking it was a human sign of victory, the crowd repeated the gesture, every arm of every alien raised to the heavens, every middle digit extended. It soon swept the galaxy. Anytime a contest was won, anytime an opponent was bested, the victor would throw both arms to the heavens and extend the middle digit of their hands, in honor of Estelle the mighty, and Estelle, the God-fearing religious woman that she was, had never made that gesture before in her life, but she truly felt that the good Lord would not hold this one time against her. Enjoy amazing story next. Selector Badal was shaking under his green robes. He stood in front of a full council, something normally reserved for high matters of the Empire. Being just a common selector, he never had to face anything like this before. Arrayed in a half-circle around him, the Empiric Council sat, each member seated in an ornate chair with multiple view screens and data pads within easy reach. The council all wore white robes, denoting their purity. As Selector Badal faced them, they barely paid him any heed. Yet, after a few moments of preparation, the head of the council, Ambassador Filak, addressed the selector. "Do you know why you were summoned here? Are you aware of the situation?" Casting his eyes downward as not to offend the council members, Badal replied, "Yes, Ambassador." There was a slight hesitation, and then the ambassador said words that have never been uttered before in the chamber. "You will not be punished for any words said by you today. You are to be forthright and complete in every statement. Do not try to placate or soften your words to us. You may even insult the Empire if you wish with no retribution." Under his robes, Badal's protective scales switched from the standard green to a slight yellowish tint. The thought of even muttering the slightest criticism of the Empire filled him with fear. He dared a glance at the council, and their face scales seemed to flash with a reddish hue. Anger. They were furious at the thought of a mere selector being able to speak his mind freely, with no consequence, but these were dire times, and to the council's credit, they were able to maintain their composure. "Do you understand, Selector? The only punishment dealt out today is if you try to hide information of this issue in any way." Badal swallowed hard and replied, "Yes, Ambassador." Ambassador Filak sat back in his chair. "Very well, Selector. You have been summoned to discuss the incident aboard the Emperor's Grace selection vehicle under the command of High Overseer Verbicht. You were the official selector on this ship. Is this correct?" Casting his eyes downward again, Badal replied, "Yes, Ambassador, but I stress all actions and decisions relating to this incident were under the direct orders of Overseer Verbicht." The ambassador interrupted. "High Overseer Verbicht, Collector." Badal's scales flashed red. "Ambassador, Verbicht does not deserve the title of Overseer, much that of High Overseer." Hisses filled the room as scales flashed red. Each council member had leapt from their seats except the ambassador. How dare a lowly selector insult his superiors? They should have Badal ripped apart scale by scale for such an affront. "Silence," roared Ambassador Filak. Slowly, the council's scales returned to green as they returned to their seats. Selector Badal was shaking, knowing what he said was a sure death sentence. He was grateful his robe hid his scales. He was sure he would be embarrassed at how yellow they would be. Selector Badal, the ambassador continued, his voice back to a normal volume. I already assured you that you are free to speak as you wish. No harm will come to you no matter what you say in this council. Ambassador Phelok glanced around at his other council members. Something the rest of you should heed well, as no such promise was made to you. If you interrupt again, you will be removed. His voice left no doubt he was not just talking about being removed from the room. They would be removed permanently. Shocked silence greeted this statement. Never before had any ambassador threatened other council members this way. Even Selector Badal was stunned. This was unheard of. The ambassador continued, The critical nature of this meeting is more important than protocols and procedures. This meeting is to, if my fears are founded, to protect the very empire itself. I will not have pomp, I will not have ceremony, but I will, by the emperor, have the truth. Ambassador Phelok looked back at the selector, who was obviously shaking, where he stood. Selector Badal, I ask you to gather yourself and your courage and to uphold your duty to the empire. I ask you for the truth, the unfiltered, honest to the emperor truth. You must do this. Swallowing hard, gathering his courage, and preparing himself to do his duty, Selector Badal's scales slowly turned blue. The ambassador smiled upon noticing the change of tint around Badal's eye scales. Badal was determined. He would do his duty for the empire. Now, Selector Badal, begin with your selection choice and give a full report from there. Badal gave a curt nod of his head, set his jaw, and started his report. As the council is aware, the empire tests each new subject species we encounter as to where they will fit best when assimilated into our ranks. The Devi race was perfect for farming and labor. The Tavis were nothing better than slaves, while the ferocious Vantus were a good fit for our military. While searching for more planets to add to our great empire, we picked up signals from the third planet in the Sol system. It held a race that called themselves humans. Humans were large. They stood a talon and claw above even our largest warriors. They were in the simple stages of space travel, sending probes to other planets and such. They seemed to be no threat. Every eye was trained on Badal as he spoke. Badal used his datapad to relay images from the Emperor's grace to the Council's view screens. In my selection process, I discovered that this species seemed to be fighters. As you see on your screen, here is a conflict we watched for the selection process. On each screen flashed an image of human warriors fighting with each other. It was a small skirmish, with only 5 humans to each side, but the battle was intense. Covered head to toe in protective gear, the warriors ran, ducked, and moved with incredible swiftness at each other, seemingly careless to their own mortality. They fought like the Emperor was watching them. They are fast and large, aren't they? Council member Davant said to no one in particular. Selector Badal nodded earnestly, in agreement. Exactly, council member, he hissed excitedly. Of all species brought into the folds of the Empire, fighters were the rarest, so I was excited to think we would soon add a whole race of great warriors to uphold and promote the glory of the Emperor. Badal made a few more commands on his data pad, and the view screens changed. As you see, council members, he began. A data analysis of their weapons showed no threat, simple projectile weapons that fired at a velocity that would not even crack the hardened scales of our elite troops. Verbict ordered the standard capture protocol, and deemed 5 of these trained human warriors would be enough to test their mettle against our elite troops. Not a single scale changed when Selector Badal did not use the normal honorifics when mentioning High Overseer Verbict. All council members were staring raptly at their view screens. When the 5 were date 8/3 aboard the ship, we followed the standard protocols. Using linguistic translators, we informed them that they were to engage in battle against 5 of our fighters. Elite warriors against elite warriors. How they fought and died would determine how their race would be accepted into the Empire. Fight well, and you would become a warrior caste. Fight poorly, and be servants to the Empire as they saw fit. Refuse to fight, and become slaves. As usual, they cried a misunderstanding. They begged and pleaded for their freedom. They even attempted to offer compensation to be let loose. In most species, this is the case. Selector Badal scratched at his datapad again, and the view screens changed to see the humans huddled together, talking quietly amongst themselves. As you see, Badal explained, the humans took less time than most species to accept their fate. We gave them 2 cycles to prepare for battle, but after 12 of their hours they seemed to understand their deaths were imminent, but it looked as though they intended to fight. This gave us great hope. Here. Badal hesitated. He slowly entered, commands on his datapad, and said, "This is where it all went wrong. I want you to listen to this part right here." Over the loudspeakers in the room, the translation protocols changed the uncouth, brutish language the humans used into the civilized tongue of the Empire. The humans were all talking, discussing what they could do when one human raised his rifle and said, "Like this is going to do anything to them. What are we going to do?" Another human looked at him and said, "Go for their eyes." The loudspeakers quieted. The council members looked at each other confused. Ambassador Filak addressed the room. "I am not certain of the importance of this. Why? Did you single out this? What am I missing?" Shaking where he stood, Badal cast his eyes down once again, to reveal that a council member may have less knowledge than a lowly selector. But Badal was too far in to stop now. "Ambassador, the humans were aware their weapons would not be effective against our warriors' hardened scales. They understood this without having ever seen us. How could they know this?" This alarmed me greatly, and I informed Verbict that we should cancel this exercise immediately. We were dealing with a race that may have psychic abilities, could read minds, predict the future, or a whole slew of other possibilities. But Verbict Badal almost spit the word out as if the mere name left a distaste in his jaws. Insisted we proceed. He insisted. Every council member replayed the video of the humans talking. Some orange flashes on faces scales showed that the council members were alarmed. How did the humans know? "Continue, Selector Badal," Ambassador Filak said softly. "Continue." Badal steeled himself for the rest of his report. This was not going to be good. After the 2 standard cycles allowed, we started the contest. When the doors opened to the arena, which had been covered in plants and trees native to their world, they simply ran out into the arena, their clothing made to let them blend into their surroundings. They each carried their useless weapons. The contest should have been short, and in a way it was. As our elite warriors descended via platform lift into the arena, their golden scales and plasma weapons shining, every servant of the Empire on the ship was glowing white with pride. And then the battle began. Badal stopped. He switched the view screens to show the battle. "As you see," he said, "the humans did not huddle together for strength in numbers. They did not try to coordinate a defense of any type that we could ascertain. They simply moved into attack. Here we see Warrior Freeze try and eliminate an enemy at quite a distance away, but his eyes missed the large human crouched in the concealing bush in front of him, just a few paces away. The human shot his weapon at the face and eyes of Freeze, which as projected did not kill our warrior but did stun and hurt it enough for the human to, well, watch." The large human moved with incredible swiftness, closing the distance with Freeze while firing his weapon. The pop, pop, poppin' sound it made belied the effect it had on the Empire's elite warrior. Reeling back, his claws digging at his eyes, Freeze never saw the human swing his weapon like a club, holding onto the barrel, smashing the back end of it onto Freeze's skull, shattering it with a sickening, crunching sound. All scales flashed red in anger as the council members saw what happened. Selector Badal remained quiet as the screens showed how the humans, one by one, overtook the elite fighters of the Empire, and without hesitation or mercy, slew every last one of them. By the Emperor, their weapons were useless, but their bodies were the weapons, a council member said, watching and rewatching a scene where a human, about to be shot at point-blank range by a plasma lance while lying on the ground, kicked out and shattered a warrior's knee, and the human grappled with it when it fell. grappled with one of the Emperor's finest troops on the ground, and with its hands alone, choked the life out of the servant of the Empire. The human had been, on the ground, seemingly helpless, and it overcame the pride of the Empire. The council chambers were silent. Then, his voice strained, the ambassador asked, "And what happened after? What happened to the Emperor's grace?" Badal cast his eyes down again, not from protocol this time, but from shame. When we opened the hatch to neutralize the threat, the humans rushed into the ship proper. We were able to kill 2 of them, but at the expense of all 8 of our security force. They exchanged their own weapons for our plasma lances, which they seemed to handle as if they were trained by the Emperor himself. Verbict ordered the evacuation of the Emperor's grace, abandoning it to the humans. He took a shuttle for himself and left the rest of us to our fates. There were 23 servants of the Empire on the Emperor's grace. 6 made it to the escape pods or shuttles. All others were lost. Red scales flashed. Selector Badal was sure that Verbict would meet quite a dire end. "Thank you, Selector," the ambassador said. "Your report is of the greatest importance to the Empire. We now know a race of highly trained soldiers inhabit that world. Thank the Emperor they have not discovered gravimetric propulsion. We will quarantine their world and prevent them from reaching the stars. To think, an entire planet of highly trained warriors let loose in the universe. My scales shudder at the thought." With his decision made, Ambassador Filak started to address the council and was shocked when he noticed Badal still standing in the room watching them. "You are excused, Selector," the ambassador said sternly. "There is more," Badal said weakly. "More?" the ambassador asked, confused. "We lost a ship to a race of superfighters. What more could there possibly be?" Without saying a word, Badal used his data pad to activate the view screens and the loudspeakers. Once again, the humans were shown before the battle, discussing amongst themselves. "Why us?" one asked. "They think we are the military." "They think we are soldiers," another said. But these are just paintball guns. This is a game. We are not soldiers." "I am an accountant, for God's sake," replied the first. Then the view screens faded out. On every datapad, an in-depth analysis of a paintball gun and its applications flashed. Every council member's eyes were wide in shock. Videos of paintball games and explanations rolled across in front of every council member. "As you can see," Badal said solemnly, "we did not capture their elite soldiers. We captured their race's workers, farmers, number eaters. The ones we captured were simply playing a game, and they took out our elite troops with... Even if we had captured real soldiers..." Here his voice gave out. There was nothing left to say. Every council member's scales were flashing bright yellow as they desperately scanned their datapads, looking for something, anything, that would ease their fear. Badal finished with one last sentence. "And now they have a ship with gravimetric drive." As Selector Badal watched the council, he realized that their scales reflected his own, a yellow so bright he almost had to shade his eyes from it. Thanks for diving into this story with me. Don't miss out on the next one. Hit that subscribe button, give this video a big thumbs up, and drop a comment below with your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you think.